So here we are, we're back for another special episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. I'm Jeff Amrine, I'm one of the Startup Junkies. I'm here with Chandler Abbott.
Hey Jeff, thanks for having me.
And we've got Michael Eisman.
Yeah.
I was about to say the original co-host, but you were actually the second co-host after John Caggiu went on to ESPN and bigger things.
We'll actually be interviewing him.
We will?
Later this
Who's
month.
going to let that guy back in the building?
I don't know. I think,
Man.
You have to keep a tick mark of how many times ESPN is referenced.
He's gonna, yeah, absolutely. And we got our new wish they were sponsors beer today. That's Boulevard Jam Band Berry Ale, a fantastic, not really a craft brewery anymore. They're bigger than that, but a fantastic brewery in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And Michael is a Kansas City guy, but we're not going to talk about beer. Let's talk about you.
All right.
That's good. That's a good lead.
It's kind of fun and like an extra layer of nerves coming on the other side of the microphone. So thanks for having me back.
Man, we're glad to have you back. How many episodes were we on together while you were here? Did you ever count?
Probably 120.
120.
I think it was like early 30s that I took over for John. And then
So let's do the math on that. So 120 episodes times maybe 45 minutes or an hour. So that's like 120 hours of your life you'll never get back.
ever.
But we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Covered a lot of ground. Talked to a lot of interesting people.
Yeah.
And talk about, and I don't think you've interviewed me before. We did this before, but let me interview you a little bit. I'm not sure how much people know about your background, and you can start from your first memories. You know, when you were done being out of diapers, and go all the way from school and whatever you want to cover. But give us a little bit of background on you. I think the audience needs to know about
So
that.
I'll fast forward through some of the diapers
That's right, okay.
information, but so I grew up in Kansas City, Lee Summit, Missouri, just outside of Kansas City, and kind of fast forwarding through that.
Chiefs fan, Royals fan?
Yeah, more Chiefs fans. They were really bad when I was growing up,
Yeah.
so I didn't invest too much emotionally into the Royals. But anyway, I came to school at the University of Arkansas in 2010. Part of it was there's in-state tuition if you
Sure.
have decent grades and test scores. Was interested in going to an SEC school. Once I finally got down here, being in the Ozark Mountains, it was pretty incredible. Being 30 minutes away from a national forest, and then had a nationally ranked business school named after one of the greatest entrepreneurs in history of America, Sam Walton. So it was actually the only school I applied to. I just decided I wanted to go to Arkansas, applied to Arkansas, got in, and came down here. And throughout the summers of high school and in college, I worked at a Boy Scout camp.
You were an Eagle Scout.
Yeah, and an Eagle Scout. That
You
doesn't-
are. It's like being a Marine.
Right.
Once an Eagle Scout,
Yeah.
always an Eagle Scout. Semper Fi, brother.
Scout's honor, brother. So anyway, worked there at the Nature Lodge, catching snakes, teaching kids about stars, teaching merit badges, and then the last 2 summers was the program director for the camp. And really enjoyed that. There's a lot of professional development down there, just in that kind of micro ecosystem of the camp, a lot of leadership opportunities within the program. But you're not able to get a lot of internship experience if you're down at Boy Scout camp every summer. And so I wanted to come down for one more summer, and this is my coming up on my junior year, and wanted to come back and work for another summer, but was told you have to have an internship, otherwise you're not going to be able to go back down to camp. And a couple weeks after that, I got an email from Stacy Sterner at the Northwest Arkansas Council that they had partnered with AT&T and a lot of other local businesses to start an internship program in the area to tie local college students with local businesses. And it was through that program that I was introduced to Jeff Amrine and Startup Junkie when they were doing the first iteration of the ARC Challenge. It was actually the first business accelerators in the state. And that was really, and I'm not just saying this to flatter you, I don't have any performance reviews from you anymore, so that's
It's all done, right? You're gone.
And that really
Say
was
anything you want.
yeah, you can edit afterwards. A shift for me in, you grow up, you go to college, you get a job. That was kind of when I had this realization where it's like you know something, but then you really learn it and know it. That you can start something, you can start your own business. And so through that internship, I worked with 12, I think, 12 or
Right,
13.
from all over the country,
Really,
all over the world.
Team
We had some,
Singapore,
that's
from
right.
India. So got to work with all of these different entrepreneurs, leading focus groups, helping with financial projections, and just kind of a lot of. It was very, very different than business school when it's the first 3 months or first year of a startup.
You got a lot of
a lot of
direction
theory.
from me and others, right? It's like, dude, figure it out. They need help. What's your major?
Finance.
Okay, they all need financial help.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
That's
It's about how much
pretty much
guidance
it.
you got.
Like this kid could probably figure it out, and so
And just one slide aside there. And I remember when I first met you, and we reviewed all the resumes and we kind of rank ordered who we wanted. And I can remember clearly reviewing your resume. It's like smart guy will be a good fit. But when I met you, the one thing that was notable was you didn't say a lot. And I thought, this guy is really introverted. But you always had a sunny personality, smile on your face. So I was like, either he's a total con man or he's just quiet and he's gonna figure it out. And you have no idea on first impression. Good first impression, but you seemed quiet and you're much more extroverted in reality. I think you were probably just analyzing me, like what kind of idiot have I jumped in with here?
Well, I think that I've noticed that I do that in a lot of situations. I mean, even at Acre Trader, I've
Yeah.
noticed that, like, and I think when I first started full time
Yeah.
at Startup Junkie, you kind of want to assess a situation before being too dominant of
Yeah.
a personality, I guess,
Yeah.
or at least
You were a good active listener, I'll put it to you that way. You were definitely absorbing
yeah.
rather than,
And I don't know, it
Yeah.
definitely wasn't strategic at the time.
Sure.
But I think there's some of the taking in your surroundings. What does this team need?
Sure.
What role would I be best to play
Yeah.
here? How often does Jeff drop the F-bomb? That kind of like understand the culture.
at least once a day.
Yeah.
Just to maintain my sailor quota.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that a lot, and also like I was Googling angel investing before I walked into that interview. It wasn't like I knew a whole lot, and so I wasn't that confident. And I think, well, most quotes are attributed to Abraham Lincoln, but one of them is, and I'll paraphrase here, that it's better to leave your mouth closed and have people wondering if you're an idiot rather than open your mouth and remove all doubt. And
That's a good one.
so I think that was probably the strategy I was using then.
No, it was good.
Yeah.
But anyway, keep going. So you're in the ARC Challenge and being helpful and helping all these companies. What comes next?
Yeah, so finished that semester and you introduced me to Tim McFarland, who
Mhm.
I ended up working with in the CEO forums next door to us here at Centerspace. And worked with Tim for the following year, basically as an associate intern helping with all of the CEO forums, the leadership development group. And through that senior year, I think you had told me as the internship ended, if you have room in your schedule next year, then take my new venture development class. It's basically write a business plan and then figure out how to present it. And I think this may have come up that the business plan could count as your honors thesis. You wouldn't have to just write a research report. You could write a business plan, and that sounded a lot more fun to me. And so I found room in my schedule, signed up for your class, and through that was able to, with an awesome team, create Biobotic Solutions at the time, Biobotic Systems now. Learned a lot about entrepreneurship through that class, doing all the customer development, and then building the business plan for a company that automates the manual transfer of tissue samples by introducing a robotic arm and a new container. And so that really launched, or it opened us up for a lot of opportunities.
Best 2 semesters of your college career.
Actually, though, yeah, it was. I mean, because it was so hands-on. I had the opportunity to learn from you, and then also Dr. Carol Reeves. We sat in on a lot of the MBA level entrepreneurship classes as well, and won some money at business plan competitions, and ended up starting.
Not just some money, $72,000.
Yeah, it was a lot of work, but it definitely paid off. And then started the company with the engineering support from Multicraft Contractors, and then hired an incredible CEO, Tom Ryan, out of Chicago with over 20 years of commercializing medical
And it's a real
devices.
going concern, right?
Right.
Help find strategic partners and multi-craft and
Yeah, and so that was senior year, and then decided to go back to Kansas City for 1 year to the day actually, and worked at Cerner, which is the largest employer in Kansas City.
Right.
I had dipped my toe into the entrepreneurial space, but still, I don't know, had kind of the belief that I had grown up with, that you go to college and then you get a job at a big company and that's success. And then while I was there, like I learned a lot, met a lot of incredible people, but realized that that wasn't necessarily for me, at least not that role in Cerner. And so yeah, it was a year to the day after I had started at Cerner that Jeff called, or I think you sent me an email that said, "How the heck are you? We've got an opening and we want you to come on back." And we talked on, that was Friday night that you sent it to me. We talked on Sunday and had a good chat. I went out for a long run and got back and there was an offer.
I think I probably sent you a text.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and at this end, I had always thought, so prior to you going to Cerner, we were like, why don't you stay around here? I mean, we'll get you plugged into some stuff. Why don't you know, come on with us or whatever? And we figured, fine, you're going to honor your commitments. You were already committed to Cerner. And Brett and I talked and we said, let's give me a year to go out and get jaded, find out how unfun corporate life really is. And then we'll talk later. And so when we had the opportunity, we had the funding, that's when we made the call. We were kind of going through the list of who should we talk to. We weren't super scientific in those days.
Yeah.
Who do we know that we
quiet kid?
Yeah, that we wouldn't mind drinking a beer with, that might know something, it's got the entrepreneurial spirit, and you know, we didn't go through like the Indeed psychoanalysis that we go through now, where you
Yeah.
gotta pass a test that not even the founder can pass.
Yeah.
So to come in here. But
Backstory. Jeff got a
anyway,
50%
now you
on
know,
schedule.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
All the tests the rest of you guys had to pass, it's like, man, there's a reason why I was never any good at studying stuff. But anyway, so you come back, you're on the Startup Junkie team. You come in, you're one of the kind of the key pillars when we get started. So fill in the blanks from there.
Yeah, well,
The best work experience you had of your life. Right?
so really though, I was reflecting on this a little bit last night before I came in, that that year at Cerner and just in general, like I kind of felt a little bit lost professionally, and I'm definitely someone who gets a lot of personal validation or identity out of the work that I do, and so that was like definitely a low point in confidence for me, of like trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do, coming off all the highs of these business plan competitions, and then where do I fit in this, corporate America. And over the 4 years that I was at Startup Junkie, it was more than just getting confidence that I had through business plan competitions, but was consistently put in a position where I didn't necessarily know the way, or there wasn't a game
Feeling
plan.
like an imposter, right?
Well, yeah, we talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
The kind of the imposter syndrome of like, I'm not necessarily qualified to do this, but I was surrounded with a team that empowered me, and that, if I really needed help, would be able to help me out, but just encouraged me to figure things out on my own too. And so learned a lot just through that experiential learning, which is, I think, the way that I learn best. And then also just like professionally and personally, through the programs we put on, through putting me in front of a microphone 100 times, and putting on events, was able to grow a lot in my confidence too. So just incredibly grateful for all the experiences here, and we can dive into a few too. But
So what was your aside from the hike down from Haleakala?
that was a pretty big one.
Which is pretty
Yeah.
big, 22 miles in one day,
Yeah.
downhill, razor
Oh,
sharp.
Passed out on
Volcanic
the
rocks.
artist commune.
Aside from that, yeah, sleeping on the grass in the artist commune afterwards, that was like one of the first interesting exposures. But aside from that, what was your favorite thing that you did? Was there one favorite time where you say that was really cool, I'm glad I was part of that?
Some of verbal processor can work through a couple of things, and I might
Just go ahead
it
and
might end somewhere.
blast them out. We'll rank order whatever it is you spew here.
So I think that it was more of like the feeling of everything we're doing here, all the programs, events, and everything, is all to help entrepreneurs start and grow companies. And when you can see, like, we don't do the work for them. It's not like I would go out and run the marathon for someone. It would be more of like, we set up a water station. Like it's not like a.
That's a good analogy.
Thanks, guys.
Great
Yeah.
work.
Told you, verbal process it. You know, just work through it.
Keep going, you're doing good.
But to see this startups and the companies that we're supporting finish that marathon, or that 100-miler that
Right.
they've been working on. So like, Mark Minfitz is a good example. Not someone who we did all the work for by any means. They've done a lot of work getting nationally recognized, and people can listen to the Lauren Blanco episode that we did a few months ago. But when we first met with them, it was a company that had a different name, that was kind of a side hustle hobby that a few married couples were working on together and like trying to figure out if it was going to be a real thing.
Right.
And then to see it now, after they went through Scale Up, we've met with them plenty of times. Again, not attribution to Startup Junkie, but it's been really cool to see them now have an incredible physical location up in the 8th Street Market, be circulated by one of the largest chocolate like premium chocolate companies.
National awards.
Yeah, winning multiple national awards. Any of those little moments where you can see those clients like crossing the finish line on their whatever marathon they're running, those were really special and cool to look back on. And then some of the fun things personally here, like seeing the startup crawl, like the first startup crawl, we didn't know exactly what we were doing. We wanted to model something after something cool we saw in Austin, and there were like
Yeah, they got
1,500
paid to go
people.
drinking at South by Southwest, and came back. It was Haley and Michael, and came back and said, "Let's do a startup
get
crawl
paid to
here."
drink here.
And I was like, "Is there beer?" And they're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay." Let's
And
do
it was, I mean, it was obviously more planning than that,
No,
but we had
for
every local brewery in Northwest Arkansas, like 50 startups, and it was our first kind of minimum viable product, and 1,500 people showed up, and and Haley definitely led all that, but seeing our team come together and
Pull something like that off.
pull something like that off, the run, walk, and pub crawl, just like trying different things and seeing what would
The unsanctioned, unauthorized, unadvised, 36-mile
run, walk, and pub crawl
Yeah.
through from Bentonville all the way to the Bay.
Hallucinations at the end are guaranteed. That's why we have such great interest in that event.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of fun like that.
Yeah, it was cool getting to see like demo day of the Fuel Accelerator kind of cap off your time at Startup Junkie, and
Yeah.
to watch like this grand finale of moments like that, you know.
That was a pretty good. Not swan song's the wrong thing because it's a continuum of things, but that was a pretty good way to finish. You know, Tim McFarland, a mentor to both of us, always says finish well in whatever you do, and that was a good example of another one where I know you felt a little uncomfortable because it was supply chain focused. You hadn't run an accelerator before. There was a lot of uncertainty as to whether or not we'd get world-class companies, and we did. A lot of uncertainty as to whether or not we'd get the engagement from the big companies, and we did. And not even as good of buddies and partners as we are with Revenue, not even sure how that relationship would go. And yet it all came together with pretty spectacular outcomes.
Yeah.
So,
I think, that was really uncomfortable a lot of different
Yeah.
times.
Yep.
Whether it's, a lot of different times in the, over 12 months that it took to coordinate and pull together.
just trying to convince the funder, in that case, the state,
Mhm.
that this was something that they ought to look seriously at. Because it
Right.
was a little bit different structure and different format than other things that they had funded. I mean, there was no part of that was easy.
Right. So that,
Sure.
I think that learned a lot from that. One, like, kind of understand where the momentum is going and make sure that you can, that you're not going against it, without necessity.
Right.
Was part of it, was like, there were probably things we could have done to make it easier. But also just like, there's not a substitute for hard work, and you've gotta just sometimes grind it out to get things across the
Yeah.
finish line. And that wouldn't have worked if it weren't for really strong relationships with Walmart, with
Mhm.
RevUnit, with the state, with the 25 other different enterprise partners that were involved in the program, and then with other organizations like through Startup Champions Network. That's how we found 3 of the companies.
All that bridge building that you did external.
Yeah, and not just me, but like, if it weren't for the strong relationships
Sure.
that surrounded, like I had some of them, but that surrounded the organization, it wouldn't have happened. And so I think that was another big.
But if you're
learning.
telling the truth, you really just came to work here with the hopes of finding a great wife, right?
Yes, yes. That was, I don't know if it's a fringe benefits. The contract wasn't very long he gave me, but that was pretty good too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a win, regardless of how you think about this in the future.
Yeah.
And it was fun too. I mean, it was a pretty good clandestine operation, between you and Megan Frohart when you were here. We didn't have any idea. We
That'd
always
be
kinda-
Megan Eisman. Maybe
So,
by the time
pretty
this goes
soon,
out.
yeah, Megan Eisman. But that was fun to see. Two great people, going to be a great couple and getting married here. Probably about the time this goes out, maybe a little before. So
Yeah, maybe I think the week of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, we can talk about that if you want to.
yeah.
I'd go for a lot longer than probably we have to. start
Absolutely.
with Megan, too.
Knowing what I know about these sorts of things, if you don't make that kind of mention, you're going to be in trouble later. So
Yeah.
better make sure there's airtime associated with that. So
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Love you, Megan.
those are points that you're going to need later. Trust me. No, all good. And so you've done all this kind of stuff. You got to touch so many different things. I mean, we always talked about looking for people who are willing to be Swiss Army knives and dip their fingers in things. And some days you'd be doing a lot of cerebral work, and other days it's, we're hauling chairs and setting stuff up. How did that prepare you for what you're doing now with Acre Trader?
Yeah. So I think that when there were 12 people when I started, 5 full time in the office because some were remote. So you don't have people who are taking out the trash. You don't have people who are like you're going to have to wear a lot of hats in a small company. And so I think that it prepared me in a lot of ways. We did. I think one would be say yes and less no at the beginning. So that's kind of what allowed me to do a lot of things. I just said yes and figured it out.
Right.
And then towards the end, probably like the last year and a half or so, when I had a really full plate because I had said yes and
So
less
much
no
going
to so
on,
many
yeah.
different things, then it's either figure out how to tie up. If you're going to commit to new things, then either tie up the things you're working on or surround yourself with really good people who can help with those. And so people like Chandler, who was doing a lot of the podcast work towards the end, that was what gave me the availability to go and work on fuel. And so, that was definitely something that I learned, that like continue to say yes to things, and you never know what those new experiences and opportunities will allow. But then when the plate is full, you can't, or at least it didn't work for me, continue to say yes to
Sure.
things while ignoring the things that are already on your
You
plate.
got to be more selective.
You can only spin so many plates at once. And so as far as how that's prepared me for Acre Trader, like there's been a lot of changes in what my job position looks like already, just kind of different duties and responsibilities. And I'm at that yes and less no, and there's so many different opportunities and ways that I can draw off my experience here to add value. And then knowing that I'll probably, if I'm really managing some of these things that I'm doing well, like whether it's our affiliate program, affiliate marketing, if anyone's interested, Michael at acretrader.com.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, managing
Farmland, the best asset class ever.
Well,
There, I said it.
no, I didn't. But yeah, so managing the affiliate program, all of our investor education, leading that work, like those are really big tasks. And so to not overcommit outside of those or continue to build.
Did you feel a little bit of that imposter syndrome creeping in again, where you got into it and it was like being a freshman all over again? wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the first time you're on the phone representing a different company, where at Startup Junkie, like I was the person who
You became part of the brand. I mean, you were associated closely with the brand.
part of and when there's new people coming onto the team, I knew a lot of the institutional
Right.
knowledge, or like the way things were done, or where things were put in what closets around here. But having to be the one that's asking those questions every
Right.
time, when I was used to like just knowing all of that, that was a little bit uncomfortable as well. But it's it starts to click, and I think it should be uncomfortable, otherwise it would be boring. If it's not uncomfortable for the first month, then it probably end up being boring pretty soon.
Chandler, what's the one question you've been itching to ask Michael, and now that he's
Yeah.
no longer in your reporting chain, you can ask him unshamelessly?
I've got a question that I think will benefit our users, our listeners of the podcast.
Okay.
So a lot of people want to start podcasts, or maybe their own,
Mhm.
maybe any kind of variety format, news, speaker series, you name it. So like after you've been on some 120 episodes, what advice would you give to prospective listeners that want to
Start a podcast.
start a podcast? Yeah.
So I'd say don't do it for the money. would probably be the first thing.
Good for the beer.
That's a good one.
So, yeah, I would say check what your motivation is for starting a podcast. If it's, I'm going to be the next Tim Ferriss and have 100 million listeners and $500,000 quarterly sponsorships, which he's actually moving away from that, the sponsorship model. But if that's your goal, then, you know, that's like, I want to be Tom Brady, I'm going to start playing football. It just doesn't work like that. I'd say make sure that you enjoy what you're talking about and enjoy what you're doing. So some of the best parts of having a podcast have been the relationships that it allows us to create by, it kind of gives you a reason to reach out to someone and invite them in of, hey, we want to tell your story. And then you never know what kind of relationship can grow from that. For example, Chandler, a few weeks ago or a few months ago, reached out to someone who was coming in town to do a music lecture and just invited him onto the podcast, and it ended up being an incredible episode. So I think that's one of them. And then I would say also focus on kind of at least one vertical, so listeners can know generally what they're going to get. Whereas ours was always around entrepreneurship with some element of the random show.
Sure.
And then I'd say record your first 4 or 5 episodes before releasing one, because a lot of people just record one episode because they're going to start a podcast, and then it's like that's their pilot or intro episode, and then they never come out with number 2.
Yeah.
And so like commit to the first 10 if you're going to start a podcast, and commit to it as a series that has a fixed end, and then if you want to keep going after that, then you can, but it gives you like
it's a
gives
lot
you
of
a way out.
residual ongoing work that is always going to take.
Yeah, you gotta hire
time.
someone like Chandler to do it.
That actually understand how to hook all the gazintas, the gazautas, and all that kind of stuff that makes it work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Scripted or unscripted?
For the podcast,
Yeah.
I think that also depends on. I think it's a lot more fun and it's a lot easier if it's unscripted.
Right.
I think that some element of preparation, like knowing your guests, or like what general themes you want to talk about, is necessary, because you don't want to like ask them what industry they're in. You
Right.
want to. It's just kind of
To be
respectful
able to ask
them.
informed questions.
Right.
You've done your homework ahead of time.
Right.
Or at least you can fake your way through it and they can't tell that you didn't do any preparation.
Exactly. Yeah. But then scripted would be more of like your Serial or a lot of the NPR podcasts. Those are very highly curated. They probably have a lot larger team than we do putting those together, like a TV show almost.
Sounds like school and unfun to me.
Yeah.
What else? What's the next 5 years look like for you? What are your goal? What do you want to achieve at Acre Trader?
So at Acre
You're a
Trader-
serial entrepreneur. By the way,
Yeah.
just to put the record straight here, Michael is a guy that started Biobotic Systems now, which is a going concern. FML, the board game,
Mhm.
Yep.
which successful Kickstarter campaign. Is that still a thing? You still
So
selling them? Or you
I've still got a few games left. We're not going to reorder. I don't know if I want to be the FML guy.
Did a bunch of work here to try to help create the IdeaFame platform, which still created the brand around IdeaFame Live. Our
Yeah, and we are actually going to we're going to make a plug for it. We're going to be pitching at the NWA Naturals baseball game.
Right.
People can submit their video to Caleb at StartupJunkie.org. Please submit your video.
And they'll have like 5,000 screaming fans all making fun of him and voting for him in
That's
exchange
awesome.
for money.
Yeah.
So, and if you wear a clown suit, it's not much better, I think. But maybe not. I don't know. But and now Acre Trader, where you're helping build this next big thing. So serial entrepreneur, what do you want Acre Trader to look like in 5 years?
Well, so I'll yield to Carter on some of the bulk of that
Don't let
answer.
him have all the fun.
But so I think that Acre Trader, what is really interesting about the platform and the company is that most industries have been digitized. There's been the digital transformation of supply chain, something that we talked a lot about through Fuel. There hasn't really been a digital transformation within agriculture, and so there's a lot of opportunity. And the first kind of mission and opportunity for Acre Trader is to connect capital, which there's trillions of dollars of capital, with farmland, which there's $3 trillion of in the United States, a lot of which is turning over the next 20 years, just as there's a generational shift. I think there's an incredible opportunity there, and part of, I've had a lot, as you mentioned, a lot of startup experience, but I haven't had as much on the, you know, going from 4 or 5 people to 40 or 50 people.
Right.
So personally, I want to get really, really good at the financial analysis of farms and investor education pieces, and want to understand what that scale from 5 to 50 looks like.
Mhm.
I think that AcreTrade has an opportunity to basically democratize, that word might be used a little
It's
too
not
much,
all
but-
about the money, it is a purpose-driven business.
Yeah.
Where you're unlocking value for the farmers and
Mhm.
for investors that otherwise wouldn't have access.
Right. Yeah, it's a financial instrument. There's definitely a
Mhm.
very financial focus to it, but I think that it helps. It's a win-win-win. So it helps the farmers, helps the investors, and then AcreTrader takes a much smaller fee than
Mhm.
what you find from a lot of private equity funds too. So
Do you ever find yourself in a role, because you're a good communicator, where you have to kind of translate the jargon so that the constituents, both the investors and the farmers, really understand it? Because it'd be real easy to get off into fund manager kind of speak, and most people on both sides of that equation don't understand a lot of that. Is part of your role being the translator?
yeah. So I was on my first farm tour today. Spent all of yesterday on the phone with potential investors. So, or not all, but spent time on both sides of
Right.
the business, and I think what's really important in that is like spend more time listening than talking. Understand where people are coming from. So when I talk to one person who has had a lot of experience with other real estate crowdfunding platforms, then I kind of know that they're going to want to dig into the nuts and bolts of our platform, versus someone who's spent all of their career investing in the S&P 500. They might want to talk more about how Farmland can offer some diversification.
Very cool.
But yeah, definitely, you want to understand your audience before you start speaking to them.
If you wanted to, we should probably land the plane here. We could talk for hours. I mean, there's lots of history to cover in 4 years of close association in the business. But if you had one message you wanted to leave to aspiring entrepreneurs, and startup junkies, and innovators, what would that be based on your experience?
Well, I think that I'd probably go back to the hard work piece. So like ideas that's one thing. Like we see a lot of ideas here, and the idea that has a very, very small impact on whether or not it's the venture is actually successful. It's all the hard work when no one's looking over your shoulder, and making sure that you did all the things that no one's ever going to see. Those are the things that really move the needle for a business. Like, are you willing to, when it gets so hard that your family's telling you to quit because they like don't want you to beat yourself up? Like, are you going to continue to work at that idea or that concept? I think that's more of an indicator of success than having a really good or cool idea. I think that, and then an element of leadership that I learned from you is that you always, when things go wrong, you take the credit for that. When things go well, then you pass the credit along to your team. And I think you've always done a really good job of that. And whether it's a startup or a large company, I think that's something that people need to remember.
Well, and just to kind of cap this off with sort of the really timeless words that Al Bell from Al Bell Productions said to us, which were meaningful to me, and that was one of the pretty incredible podcasts we did the first time we got together with Al Bell, the guy who'd been Motown Records and Stax Records. He said, attitude trumps aptitude if you want to achieve altitude.
Yeah.
And
He
you're the-
said it with a lot cooler voice than you.
Well, yeah. You shockingly, the guy who'd been the president of Motown is cooler than me. Surprise, phone the presses. But anyway, you're the best example of that ever. I mean, great attitude, and it was always a pleasure to have you on the team. And we miss you dearly, but we're really excited for what you're doing next.
Thank you. And thanks
Yeah.
for taking a bet on me a long time,
Yeah, absolutely.
A long time ago.
It paid off
Yeah.
tenfold, for sure.
So, and I know we're ready to cut here, but as I look back professionally and personally from the day I met you, the number of mentors, business opportunities, business I've started, and my future wife, I don't think I would have met 99% of my personal and professional network, especially here in Northwest Arkansas, if it weren't for meeting you and taking that job and taking your class and then coming back and working at Startup Junkie. So you've had an incredible impact on my life, and just want to really,
Wow.
really thank you
Thank
for
you.
that. And thanks for having me.
Thanks for all you do.
Yeah.
All right.